The house was older than I was, and I was no spring chicken. At 72, I'd lived in that creaking, three-story Victorian for nearly 5 decades. Its warped wooden floors groaned under my steps, and the wallpaper, once a vibrant floral print, had faded to a ghostly yellow. But it was home. It held the laughter of my late husband, George, the patter of my daughter Emily's tiny feet when she was a toddler, and the quiet evenings we'd spent together as a family, dreaming of futures that now felt like distant stars. The house wasn't just walls and a roof. It was a museum of my life. Every crack in the plaster told a story. Emily, though, didn't see it that way. At 38, she was all sharp edges and sharper words. Her life a whirlwind of deadlines and city ambitions. She'd moved back in 6 months ago, after her divorce left her with a toddler and a bruised ego. I welcomed her. Of course. What mother wouldn't? I gave her the upstairs bedroom, the one with the big bay window she'd loved as a girl. I thought it would be temporary, a soft place to land. But Emily had other plans. It's just easier, Mom, she said one evening. Her voice clipped as she scrolled through her phone. I'll take the basement. It's good enough. Good enough. Those words hit like a slap. The basement was a damp, cluttered space where George used to tinker with his model trains and where I stored boxes of Christmas ornaments we hadn't touched in years. It smelled of mildew and forgotten things. I stared at her, waiting for a laugh, a retraction, anything to soften the blow. But Emily just sipped her wine, her eyes fixed on her screen. Emily, you can't live down there, I said, my voice trembling. It's not a home. It's storage. She shrugged, not even looking up. It's fine. I don't need much. Besides, it's closer to the laundry. Her daughter, my granddaughter Lily, was upstairs, asleep in the crib I'd bought secondhand. I thought of her tiny hands, her bright eyes, and the way she deserved better than a cold, dark basement. I thought of George, who'd spent his last years fixing up this house for us, for her. And I thought of myself, pouring my heart into every corner of this place, only to hear it reduced to good enough. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house seemed to creak louder, as if it, too, was offended. I sat in the kitchen, clutching a mug of chamomile tea, staring at the worn table where George and I had planned our lives. Emily's words echoed in my head, each one a tiny fracture in the foundation of what I'd built. By dawn, I'd made a decision. If the basement was good enough for my daughter, then maybe this house wasn't good enough for me. The next morning, I called a realtor. Her name was Susan, a brisk woman with a clipboard and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She walked through the house, jotting notes about curb appeal and modern updates needed. I didn't care. I told her to list it as is. No repairs. No staging. I wanted it gone. Mrs. Harper, are you sure? Susan asked, eyeing the peeling paint in the hallway. This is a big decision. Have you talked to your family? I thought of Emily, her dismissive shrug, her insistence on the basement. I've talked enough, I said. Sell it. Susan nodded, and within a week, the sign went up in the front yard, for sale. I didn't tell Emily. I didn't tell anyone. The decision felt like a secret I was keeping from the world, a quiet rebellion against the life I'd been clinging to. The house was mine to give, mine to take away. And if Emily thought so little of it, I'd let it go entirely. The first open house was a blur. Strangers traipsed through my home, touching the banister George had refinished, opening cabinets I'd painted with him decades ago. I stayed in the backyard, pretending to weed the garden, while Lily played nearby, oblivious to the upheaval. Emily was at work. As usual, her absence a silent confirmation that she didn't care what happened to this place. That evening, she came home, dropped her bag on the counter, and frowned at the stack of realtor cards on the table. "What's this, Mom?" she asked, her tone sharp. "I'm selling the house," I said, stirring soup on the stove. My back to her. She laughed. A short, disbelieving sound. "What? You're joking." "No." I turned to face her, my hands steady despite the storm in my chest. "You said the basement was good enough. So I figured the whole house isn't worth keeping." Her face froze, the color draining from her cheeks. "You can't just, Mom. This is our home." "It's my home," I corrected, my voice low but firm. "And I'm done holding on to it for someone who thinks it's just good enough." Emily stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. For the first time in months, I had her full attention. But it was too late. The wheels were turning, and I wasn't stopping them. The days that followed were tense. Emily barely spoke to me, her silence a heavy presence in the house. She'd come home late, scoop Lily up from her crib, and retreat to the basement without a word. I heard her moving boxes down there, rearranging things, as if claiming the space would change my mind. It didn't. The realtor called with offers low once, but I didn't care. I wasn't selling for profit. I was selling for freedom. I started packing, sorting through decades of memories. George's old sweaters, Emily's childhood drawings, the photo albums we'd made together. Each item was a weight, a reminder of what I was leaving behind. But I was resolute. I'd spent too long trying to hold on to a past that no one else seemed to value. Maybe it was time to let go, to find a new place to call home, one that didn't echo with disappointment. One afternoon, while Emily was at work, I took Lily to the park. She toddled around, chasing butterflies, her laughter a bright spot in my clouded heart. I wondered what kind of life I could give her if I stayed, if I kept pouring myself into a house that no longer felt like mine. I wondered if Emily would ever understand why I was doing this, or if she'd just see me as the villain in her story. When we got back, Emily was waiting in the kitchen, her arms crossed. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her voice tight. "You can't just sell the house without telling me. This is my home, too. Lily's home." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of her own choices. For a moment, I softened. But then I remembered her words, her casual dismissal of everything this house meant. "You chose the basement, Emily," I said quietly. "You made it clear this place doesn't matter to you. So I'm letting it go." She flinched, and for the first time, I saw something like regret flicker across her face. But I wasn't sure if it was for the house, or for us. The air in the house grew heavier as the days passed, like the weight of unsaid words piling up between us. Emily's silence was a wall, and I didn't know how to break through it. I didn't even know if I wanted to. I kept packing, sorting through decades of my life, each box a step closer to letting go. The realtor, Susan, called with updates, more offers. Still low, but I told her to keep pushing. I wasn't after money. I wanted out. Emily started spending more time in the basement, turning it into a makeshift apartment. She dragged down an old couch, hung a curtain to block off the storage area, and even set up a tiny table for Lily's toys. It was as if she was digging in, staking her claim on a space I'd already decided to abandon. I watched her efforts with a mix of pity and frustration. Did she think this would change my mind? Did she think a few throw pillows could erase her words? One evening, I found her sitting on the basement stairs, Lily asleep in her arms. The dim light from a bare bulb cast shadows across her face, making her look older than her 38 years. "Mom," she said, her voice low. "Why are you doing this?" "Really?" I leaned against the wall, my hands in my pockets, searching for words that wouldn't cut deeper. "Emily, this house is my life. It's where I raised you, where your father and I built everything. When you said the basement was good enough, it felt like you were saying I wasn't enough. Like everything I've held on to means nothing." Her eyes widened, and she shifted Lily's weight in her arms. "That's not what I meant," she said, her voice breaking. "I was just, I don't know, trying to make things easier. For both of us." "Easier," I repeated, my tone sharp despite myself. "You think moving into a damp basement with your daughter is easier? For who?" She didn't answer, just looked down at Lily, her fingers brushing the girl's curls. I wanted to shake her, to make her see the hurt she'd caused. But I also wanted to hug her, to pull her close like I did when she was small. The conflict tore at me, but I held firm. I'd made my choice. The next day, a couple came to see the housey, a young pair, newly married, with stars in their eyes. They walked through the rooms, talking about paint colors and where they'd put a nursery. I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to scrub the counters, but their voices carried. They loved the house, its quirks, its history. They saw what Emily couldn't. When Susan called later to say they'd made an offer, a good one, I told her to accept it. No negotiation, no second thoughts. The deal was done. I didn't tell Emily right away. I needed time to process it myself, to walk through the house one last time as its owner. I touched the banister, the door frames, the chipped teacup I'd kept on the mantel for years. Each memory was a thread, and I was pulling them loose, one by one. I wondered if I was making a mistake, if I was letting anger cloud my judgment. But then I'd remember Emily's shrug, her careless words, and my resolve would harden. A week later, the paperwork was signed. The house was no longer mine. The closing date was set for a month out, and I had to figure out where to go next. I hadn't thought that far ahead, hadn't planned beyond the act of selling. I considered a small apartment, maybe something closer to town, where I could start fresh. But the idea felt hollow. This house had been my anchor, and without it, I was adrift. Emily found out about the sale from a neighbor, of all people, Mrs. Callahan, who'd lived across the street since Nixon was president. Mentioned it in passing while Emily was getting the mail. I was in the backyard, pruning roses, when Emily stormed out, her face a storm of fury and tears. "You sold it," she shouted, her voice carrying over the fence. "Without even telling me. How could you, Mom?" I set down the shears, wiping my hands on my apron. "You didn't want to talk, Emily. You made that clear. I did what I needed to do." "This is my home," she said, her voice cracking. "Lily's home. Where are we supposed to go?" "You said the basement was good enough," I said, the words bitter on my tongue. "Find another basement." She stared at me, her chest heaving, and for a moment, I thought she might scream. But instead, she turned and walked back inside, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I stood there, the roses blurring through sudden tears. I'd won, hadn't I? I'd made my point. So why did it feel like I'd lost everything? That night, I heard her crying in the basement. Soft, muffled sobs that carried through the floorboards. I sat on the edge of my bed, listening, my heart twisting. I wanted to go to her, to say I was sorry, to take it all back. But pride, or maybe stubbornness, kept me rooted. This was her lesson, I told myself. She needed to understand what she'd thrown away. The next morning, Emily was gone before I woke up. She'd left a note on the kitchen table, taking Lily to daycare. We'll talk later. No apology. No softness. Just those curt words. I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. But it didn't erase the ache in my chest. I spent the day packing, moving faster now, as if speed could outrun my doubts. I donated George's old clothes, boxed up my books, and called a storage company for the rest. The house was emptying out, and so was I. By evening, Emily still wasn't home. I sat in the living room, the silence pressing in, and wondered where she'd gone. I pictured her driving aimlessly, Lily in the back seat, both of them caught in the fallout of my decision. For the first time, I questioned whether I'd gone too far. Selling the house wasn't just about teaching Emily a lesson. It was about appending her life, Lily's life, our life together. I'd wanted to shake her awake. But what if I'd broken something instead? When she finally came home, it was past midnight. I was still awake, sitting in the dark, when I heard the front door creak. Her footsteps were slow, deliberate, like she was carrying something heavy. I waited, my heart pounding, for her to come upstairs. But she didn't. She went straight to the basement, and the house fell silent again. The closing date loomed closer, a ticking clock I couldn't ignore. The house was half empty now, my life packed into cardboard boxes labeled with black marker, kitchen, photos, George's things. Each one felt like a piece of me, sealed away for good. I'd found a small apartment in town, a one-bedroom with beige walls and no character. It wasn't home, but it was a place to land. I told myself it would be enough. Emily and I existed in a fragile truce. She spoke to me in short sentences, mostly about Lily, her daycare schedule, her favorite snacks. We didn't talk about the house, or the sale, or the basement. It was as if we'd both agreed to pretend the rift between us didn't exist. But it was there, in every glance we avoided, every door closed a little too hard. One afternoon, while Lily napped, I found Emily in the basement, sorting through a box of her old things. She held up a faded stuffed rabbit, its ears frayed from years of love. "Remember this," she said, her voice soft, almost wistful. I nodded, leaning against the doorway. "You wouldn't go anywhere without Mr. Floppy. Used to scream bloody murder if we forgot him." She smiled, just a flicker, and set the rabbit aside. "I was such a brat," she said, her eyes on the box. "I don't know how you put up with me." "You were a kid," I said, stepping closer. "Kids are supposed to be brats sometimes." She looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who'd climb into my lap and beg for one more story. But then her face hardened, and the moment was gone. "I'm trying, Mom," she said. "I'm trying to make this work. The basement, Lily, everything. But you're making it impossible." Her words stung, but I held my ground. "I'm not the one who called this house good enough. Emily, that was you." She flinched, her hands tightening around a stack of old letters. "I didn't mean it like that. I was just overwhelmed. The divorce, Lily, my job. I thought the basement would be easier, less pressure. I didn't think you'd take it so personally." "Personally?" I echoed, my voice rising. "This house is personal, Emily. It's your father's hands in every repair, my heart in every room. You dismissed it like it was nothing." She stood, brushing dust off her jeans. "And you sold it like it was nothing. You didn't even ask me, Mom. You just decided." Like my opinion doesn't matter. We stood there, facing each other in the dim basement light, the air thick with years of unspoken hurt. I wanted to tell her I was sorry, that I'd acted out of pain, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I turned and walked upstairs, leaving her with her boxes and her rabbit. The next day, I went to the realtor's office to sign more papers. Susan handed me a check deposit from the buyers. It was more money than I'd expected, enough to start over somewhere new. But as I held it, all I could think about was the house, the memories I was leaving behind. I drove home slowly, the check burning a hole in my purse, and wondered if I'd made the right choice. When I got back, Emily was in the kitchen, feeding Lily mashed peas. She didn't look up as I came in, but Lily squealed, reaching for me. I scooped her up, her warmth a small comfort against the coldness between her mother and me. We need to figure this out, Emily, I said, bouncing Lily gently. The sale's done. We've got a month to move. She set the spoon down, her movements deliberate. I'm looking for a place, she said, her voice flat. Somewhere cheap. Maybe a studio. I'll manage. The word manage cut deeper than I expected. I pictured her and Lily in some cramped, soulless apartment, and guilt twisted in my gut. You don't have to do this alone, I said. We can figure something out together. She laughed, a bitter sound. Together. You made this decision without me. Mom, why should I trust you now? I didn't have an answer. I kissed Lily's forehead and handed her back, then went to my room to pack another box. The silence followed me, heavier than ever. That night, I found an old photo album in the attic, one I hadn't looked at in years. It was filled with pictures of Emily as a child, her first bike, her 5th birthday, her high school graduation. In every one, she was smiling, her eyes bright with possibility. I sat on the floor, tracing her face with my finger, and wondered where that girl had gone. Had I pushed her away, or had life done that on its own? The next morning, I decided to try again. I made Emily's favorite breakfast pancakes with blueberries, just like George used to make. When she came upstairs, she paused, her eyes lingering on the table. What's this? She asked, her tone wary. Just breakfast, I said, pouring coffee. Sit. Please. She hesitated, then sat, pulling Lily onto her lap. We ate in silence at first, the only sound Lily's babbling. Then, slowly, Emily started talking about her job, her fears for Lily, the weight of starting over. I listened, really listened, for the first time in months. And when she finished, I reached across the table, my hand hovering over hers. I'm sorry, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. I shouldn't have sold the house without talking to you. I was hurt, but that's no excuse. She looked at me, her eyes glistening. I'm sorry, too, she whispered. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't know how to say I'm struggling. For the first time in weeks, we didn't feel like strangers. It wasn't a fix. Not yet. But it was a start. As I cleared the plates, I wondered if we could rebuild something new. Not in this house, but in the space between us. The pancakes were a small bridge, but it wasn't enough to close the chasm between us. Emily and I tiptoed around each other, our apologies fragile, like glass that could shatter with one wrong move. The house was emptying out faster now, the rooms echoing with the absence of furniture, of life. I'd hired movers to take what I couldn't keep to storage. And every day, another piece of my history disappeared. The dining table where we'd had those pancakes was gone by the end of the week, replaced by a folding card table that wobbled under the weight of a teacup. Emily was looking for a place. Or so she said. She'd come home with real estate flyers, circling listings for tiny apartments in neighborhoods I didn't recognize. I wanted to ask her to stay with me, to share the new apartment. But the words felt like a betrayal of my own resolve. I'd sold the house to prove a point, hadn't I? To let go of a past that no longer fit. Inviting her to follow me felt like admitting defeat. One evening, I found her in the backyard, sitting on the old swing set George had built when she was 6. Lily was asleep in her stroller, and Emily was staring at the horizon, her face unreadable. I sat beside her, the swing creaking under my weight. You used to love this thing, I said, nudging the ground with my foot. You'd beg your dad to push you higher. She nodded, her lips twitching into a half smile. I thought I could touch the sky if I went high enough. We sat in silence, the night air cool against my skin. I wanted to ask her what she was thinking, what she wanted, but I was afraid of the answer. Instead, I said, I'm moving next week. The apartment's ready. You and Lily can visit anytime. She turned to me, her eyes searching mine. Visit, she repeated, her voice flat. Like we're strangers. That's not what I meant, I said quickly, but she was already standing, pushing the stroller toward the house. I watched her go, the swing still swaying behind me, and felt the weight of my choices settle deeper. The next day, I went through the attic, the last frontier of my packing. It was a dusty, cramped space, filled with boxes I hadn't touched in years. I found George's old toolbox, his handwriting scrawled on the side in faded marker. I found Emily's school projects, her report cards, a clay handprint she'd made in kindergarten. Each item was a memory, sharp and bittersweet. I sat among the boxes, tears streaming down my face, and wondered if I was erasing my daughter's history along with my own. When Emily came home, she found me there, surrounded by the past. She hesitated at the attic door, then climbed up, sitting cross-legged on the floor. What's all this? She asked, picking up a photo of her and George at the beach, both of them laughing, sand on their faces. Your life? I said, my voice thick. Our life. I'm trying to figure out what to keep. She looked at the photo, her fingers tracing George's face. I miss him, she said, so quietly I almost missed it. I miss how things used to be. Me too, I admitted. But we can't live in the past. Emily. That's why I sold the house. It was holding me back, holding us back. She shook her head, her eyes wet. It wasn't holding me back, Mom. It was the only thing keeping me together. Her words hit like a punch. I thought I was setting us free, but maybe I'd just taken away her anchor. I didn't know, I said, reaching for her hand. She let me take it, her grip tight, like she was afraid to let go. We sat there for a long time, sorting through the boxes together. We laughed over her old drawings, cried over George's letters, and slowly, the wall between us started to crumble. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was something close. When we finally went downstairs, the house felt a little less empty, even with the boxes gone. The next morning, Emily showed me a listing for a 2-bedroom apartment, not far from mine. It's not much, she said, her voice hesitant. But it's got a little yard for Lily. I thought, maybe we could be neighbors. I looked at the flyer, at the hope in her eyes, and felt a warmth I hadn't felt in months. Neighbors, I said, smiling. I like the sound of that. We spent the rest of the day planning her move, looking at furniture online, talking about Lily's future. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As we sat at the card table, eating takeout pizza, I realized that maybe the house wasn't the only thing I'd been holding on to. Maybe I'd been holding on to my anger, my hurt, my need to be right. Letting go of the house was one thing. Letting go of that was harder. By the end of the week, the movers came for the last of my things. I stood in the empty living room. The walls bare. The floors scuffed but clean. Emily was there, holding Lily. Her eyes red but steady. "You sure about this, Mom?" she asked, her voice soft. "No," I admitted, looking around. "But it's done. And maybe it's for the best." She nodded, shifting Lily to her hip. "Maybe it is." We walked out together, locking the door behind us. The for sale sign was gone, replaced by a sold sticker that felt like a final chapter. As we drove away, I glanced back at the house, its windows dark, its story sealed inside. I didn't know what came next, but for the first time, I felt ready to find out. Moving day came like a storm, swift and disorienting. The apartment I'd rented was small, with thin walls and a view of a parking lot. But it was mine. I unpacked slowly, arranging my few belongings with care, trying to make the space feel like home. The absence of the house was a constant ache, like a missing limb. I kept expecting to hear its familiar creaks, to smell the faint lavender of the sachets I'd tucked in the closets. Instead, I got the hum of traffic and the sterile scent of new paint. Emily and Lily moved into their apartment a few days later, just a 10-minute walk from me. I helped her carry boxes, my arms aching but my heart lighter than it had been in weeks. Her place was modest, with scuffed floors and a tiny kitchen, but it had a patch of grass out back where Lily could play. Emily hung curtains, set up a crib, and even bought a small table for the two of them. It wasn't the house, but it was a start. We didn't talk about the sale much. It was a wound we both skirted, afraid to press too hard. But there were moments, small ones, where I saw glimpses of the old Emily. She'd laugh at Lily's antics, or hum an old song while cooking, and I'd remember the girl who used to dance around the living room with George. Those moments gave me hope. Fragile but real. One afternoon, while Lily napped, Emily came over to my apartment. She sat on my couch, a thrift store find that sagged in the middle, and looked around. "It's weird," she said, her fingers tracing the armrest. "Seeing you here. It doesn't feel like you." "It's not," I admitted, handing her a mug of tea. "But I'm trying to make it mine." She nodded, sipping the tea, her eyes distant. "I keep thinking about the house. About Dad. About how I messed everything up." "You didn't mess it up," I said, sitting beside her. "We both made choices. Mine weren't perfect either." She looked at me, her expression raw. "I should have fought harder for it. For you. I got so caught up in my own mess. I forgot what the house meant." I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. It meant a lot to me, too. But it's gone now. We've got to build something new. She nodded, tears spilling over. And for the first time, I felt like we were on the same side. We sat there, holding hands, the silence between us softer than it had been in months. Over the next few weeks, we settled into a new rhythm. I'd watch Lily while Emily worked, taking her to the park or reading her stories on my lumpy couch. Emily would stop by after work, sometimes with takeout, and we'd talk about her job, her fears, her hopes for Lily. I told her about George, stories she'd heard 100 times but listened to like they were new. It wasn't the house, but it was something. A family, pieced back together. One evening, Emily invited me to her place for dinner. She'd cooked spaghetti with homemade sauce, a recipe George had taught her. Lily was in her high chair, smearing sauce on her face. And we laughed until our sides hurt. It was the first time I'd felt truly at home since the move. After dinner, Emily pulled out a box I hadn't seen before. It was one from the attic, filled with old photos and letters. "I kept this," she said, her voice shy. I thought, maybe we could go through it together. We spent hours on her living room floor, sorting through the memories. There was a photo of George and me on our wedding day, his arm around my waist, both of us grinning like fools. There was Emily's first school play, her face painted like a cat, her eyes wide with excitement. Each memory was a thread, weaving us closer. "I'm sorry I said the basement was good enough," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean it. I was just scared." "I know," I said, pulling her into a hug. "I'm sorry I sold the house. I was scared, too." She hugged me back, her tears soaking my shoulder, and I felt the weight of our mistakes lift. Just a little. We weren't fixed. Not completely. But we were trying. And that was enough for now. As I walked home that night, the stars bright above the city, I thought about the house. It was someone else's now, filled with their dreams, their stories. But I had Emily, and Lily, and the chance to build something new. The house had been my anchor, but maybe I didn't need it anymore. Maybe family was enough. The next day, I bought a small plant for my apartment of fern, green and stubborn, like me. I set it on the windowsill, where it caught the morning light. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I watered it, whispering to it like George used to whisper to his roses, and felt a flicker of hope. This wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was the one I had, and I was ready to live it. The weeks turned into months, and the sharp edges of our new lives began to soften. My apartment, once sterile and foreign, started to feel like a home. I hung photos on the walls of Emily's childhood, George's smile, Lily's first steps. The fern on my windowsill grew, its fronds spilling over the pot, a quiet reminder that life could thrive in small spaces. Emily's apartment, too, took on a warmth I hadn't expected. She painted the walls a soft blue, hung Lily's drawings, and even started a tiny herb garden in the backyard. We were rebuilding, not just our homes, but ourselves. Our relationship wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, old hurts that flared up unexpectedly. But we talked now, really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. I learned about the pressures of her job, the loneliness of her divorce, the fear that she wasn't enough for Lily. She learned about my grief, the way George's absence still haunted me, the way her words about the basement had cut deeper than I'd admitted. We were learning to see each other, not as mother and daughter locked in a battle, but as two people trying to navigate a world that didn't always make sense. Lily was our glue. At 2 years old, she was a whirlwind of energy, her laughter filling the gaps we couldn't. I'd take her to the library, where she'd pull books off the shelves, or to the park, where she'd chase pigeons with reckless abandon. Emily would join us when she could, and those moments watching Lily toddle between us, her tiny hands reaching for ours, felt like a second chance. One Saturday, Emily suggested we visit the old house. "Just to see it," she said, her voice hesitant. "I don't know why, but I need to." I wasn't sure I was ready. The thought of standing in front of that Victorian, knowing it belonged to someone else, felt like ripping open a wound. But Emily's eyes were pleading, and I couldn't say no. So we piled into my car, Lily in her car seat, and drove across town. The house looked different. The new owners had painted it a bright white, replacing the faded green I'd loved. The garden was neat, the roses trimmed, and a tricycle sat in the driveway. It was alive, vibrant in a way it hadn't been in years. I parked across the street, and we sat in silence, staring at the place that used to be ours. "It's weird," Emily said, her voice soft. "It's the same, but it's not." I nodded, my throat tight. It's their home now. They're making their own memories. Lily babbled in the back seat, oblivious to the weight of the moment. Emily reached for my hand, her fingers cold. "I'm sorry I didn't fight for it," she said. "I should have told you what it meant to me." I squeezed her hand, tears pricking my eyes. I should have listened. I was so caught up in my hurt. I didn't see yours. We sat there, holding hands, watching the house glow in the afternoon sun. A young woman came out the front door, carrying a toddler not much older than Lily. She waved at us, a friendly gesture, and I waved back, my heart twisting. This was their story now, and that was okay. On the drive home, Emily was quiet, but it wasn't the heavy silence of before. It was thoughtful, like she was turning something over in her mind. When we got to her apartment, she invited me in for coffee. As we sat at her little table, Lily coloring on the floor, she said, "I want to make this work. Mom. Us. Not just neighbors, but family. I want that, too," I said, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. "But it's going to take time. We've got a lot to rebuild." She nodded, her eyes meeting mine. "I know. But I'm in. For Lily. For you. For me." That night, I lay awake in my apartment, the hum of the city outside my window. I thought about the house, about the life we'd left behind, and the one we were building now. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were moving forward, together. The next day, I invited Emily and Lily over for lunch. I made soup, the kind George used to love, and we ate at my wobbly card table, laughing as Lily flicked carrots onto the floor. It wasn't the big dining room of the old house, but it was enough. More than enough. As we cleaned up, Emily pulled out her phone, showing me a picture of a swing set she'd found online. "For the backyard," she said, her eyes bright. "I want Lily to have what I had. Maybe not the same, but close." I smiled, picturing Lily on that swing, reaching for the sky like Emily used to. "It's perfect," I said, and I meant it. Time has a way of smoothing over cracks, not erasing them, but making them less jagged. 6 months after the move, Emily and I were finding a new normal. We weren't just neighbors now. We were something closer, something that felt like family again. Lily was the center of it, her giggles and tantrums pulling us together like gravity. My apartment, once a placeholder, was becoming a home, filled with small to chase a quilt from the old house, a photo of George on the fridge, Lily's crayon scribbles taped to the wall. Emily's apartment was coming alive, too. The swing set she'd bought was up in the backyard, and Lily spent hours on it, squealing as Emily pushed her higher. I'd watch from my own balcony, a mug of tea in hand, and feel a quiet pride. We'd lost the house, but we'd gained something else, a chance to start over, to rebuild on our own terms. One Sunday, Emily asked me to come with her to a flea market. "I want to find something for the apartment," she said, buckling Lily into her stroller. "Something that feels like us." The market was a sprawl of color and chaos, vendors selling everything from chipped teacups to vintage lamps. We wandered through the aisles, Lily pointing at shiny trinkets, Emily haggling over a small wooden bookshelf. I found a set of old picture frames, their edges worn but sturdy, and bought them on impulse. "For your photos," I told Emily, handing her the bag. "The ones from the attic." She smiled, a real smile, and hugged me. Thanks, Mom. I'll put them up tonight. That evening, she invited me over to see the frames in place. She'd hung them in her living room, filled with pictures of us, George and me, at our anniversary. Emily as a teenager, Lily's first birthday. The sight of them, lined up against the blue walls, made my chest ache in the best way. It's starting to feel like home, Emily said, her voice soft. It is, I agreed, touching the frame with George's face. He'd be proud of you. She looked away, her eyes glistening. I hope so. I'm trying to be the mom he'd want me to be. You are, I said, and I meant it. She was trying. Every day, and so was I. As spring turned to summer, we fell into a rhythm. I'd watch Lily during the day, giving Emily time to focus on her job. She'd started taking on freelance projects, working late into the night. Her determination a quiet echo of George's work ethic. I'd bring her coffee, sit with her while she typed, and we'd talk about the future, hers, Lily's, mine. It wasn't always easy, but it was honest. One afternoon, while Lily napped, Emily showed me a letter she'd found in the attic box. It was from George, written to her when she was 10, before he got sick. Dear Em, it read, you're my favorite adventure. Keep exploring, even when it's hard. Love, Dad. She read it aloud, her voice breaking, and I held her as she cried. I didn't know he wrote this, she said, wiping her eyes. I wish I'd kept more of him. You have, I said, pointing to her heart. And you're giving it to Lily. She nodded, folding the letter carefully. I want to do better, Mom. For her. For you. For him. You are, I said again. And this time, I saw belief in her eyes. That night, I walked home under a sky streaked with pink and gold. I thought about George, about the house, about the life we'd built and lost. Selling it had been my rebellion, my way of reclaiming control. But it had also been a bridge to this Emily and me, finding each other again. The house was gone, but its lessons remained. It had taught us to hold on, and then to let go. The next day, I planted another fern in my apartment. This one for Emily. I gave it to her with a note, for your new home. Keep growing. She laughed, setting it on her windowsill, and hugged me tight. Lily toddled over, wrapping her arms around our legs. And for a moment, we were whole. As I looked at them, my daughter and granddaughter, I realized that home wasn't a place. It was us. Together. Messy and imperfect, but trying. And that was more than good enough. A year after the sale, the sting of losing the house had faded, replaced by a quiet acceptance. My apartment was home now, its corners filled with pieces of my past and hopes for my future. Emily's place, too, had become a haven, a space where she and Lily were building their own story. We were neighbors. Yes, but more than that, we were family again, stitched together by time and effort. Lily was growing fast, her vocabulary expanding with words like Nana and swing. She'd run to me when I visited, her tiny arms outstretched, and I'd scoop her up, marveling at how much she looked like Emily at that age. Emily was thriving, too. Her freelance work had picked up, and she'd started talking about going back to school, maybe getting a degree in something she loved. I saw George in her determination, in the way she pushed through doubt to chase her dreams. One crisp fall morning, Emily called me over for breakfast. She'd made pancakes again, with blueberries, and the smell took me back to the old house, to mornings with George. We sat at her little table, Lily in her high chair, and talked about nothing and everything, her latest project. Lily's new obsession with dinosaurs. My plans to join a book club. It was ordinary, but it felt like a miracle. After breakfast, Emily pulled out a small box from under the table. "I made something for you," she said, her voice shy. Inside was a scrapbook, its cover decorated with pressed flowers. I opened it, my breath catching. It was filled with photos, letters, and mementos from the house, things she'd saved, things I thought were lost. There was a picture of the Victorian, its green paint still vibrant, and a note from George, tucked between the pages. "I wanted you to have this," Emily said, her eyes on the table. "I know the house is gone, but I thought maybe this could keep it alive." I turned the pages, tears blurring my vision. There was Emily's handprint from kindergarten, a recipe card in my handwriting, a photo of us on the porch, laughing. "It's perfect," I said, my voice thick. "Thank you." She reached for my hand, her grip steady. "I'm sorry for what I said about the basement. I didn't know how much it hurt you. I didn't know how much the house meant until it was gone." I squeezed her hand, my heart full. "I'm sorry, too. I was so focused on my pain. I didn't see yours. But we're here now. That's what matters." She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "We are. And I'm not going anywhere." Lily banged her spoon on the high chair, demanding attention, and we laughed, the tension breaking. I helped Emily clean up, then took Lily outside to the swing set. As I pushed her, her laughter echoing through the yard, I thought about the house. It had been our foundation, but it wasn't our strength. That came from us, Emily, Lily, choosing each other, day after day. Later that week, I invited them to my place for dinner. I cooked George's favorite chili, the recipe I'd perfected over decades. We ate on the floor, picnic style, because my card table had finally given out. Lily sprawled across a blanket, coloring, while Emily and I talked about the future. She wanted to take Lily to the beach next summer, to the same spot where George had taught her to build sandcastles. I wanted to travel, maybe see the mountains, something I'd always dreamed of but never done. As we talked, I realized that selling the house hadn't been the end. It had been a beginning, a painful one, but necessary. It had forced us to face our mistakes, to rebuild on stronger ground. The house had held our memories, but we were making new ones. Here, in these small spaces we'd carved out. That night, after Emily and Lily left, I sat by my fern, now joined by a second one Emily had given me. I looked at the scrapbook, its pages a bridge between past and present. I thought about George, about the life we'd built, and the one I was building now. I thought about Emily, her strength, her vulnerability, her love for Lily. And I thought about Lily, who'd grow up with stories of a house she'd never know, but a family that would always hold her. I closed the scrapbook and set it on the shelf, next to George's photo. The house was gone, but we weren't. We were here, messy and human, but together. And as I turned off the light, the city humming outside, I knew that was enough. More than enough.